Welcome to the Italian Genealogy podcast. Today we have Erick and Giuseppe Lucera, the authors of the new Biccari, and their cousin Rich Leto, who has accompanied them on their ancestral journey. So welcome, guys.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Bob, for having us. I'd like to start by introducing my cousins. First is Rich Leto, who accompanied me on our recent trip to the village to walk in the footsteps of our ancestors and meet all of our cousins. And the second is my co-author and cousin, Giuseppe Lucera, who's joining us live from Biccari. I'd also like to point out today that my third co-author, Gennaro Lucera, had passed away about a month or so ago, but today is his birthday, so we'll do this in honor of Zia Gennaro.
Thanks, Giuseppe, from joining us from Biccari in Foggia, Puglia. So it's great to have you on the phone from Italy.
Okay, so it seems like Giuseppe's still trying to log in here, so we'll bring him in when he gets a good connection. So why don't I start here with the next slide 4, where I introduced my cousin Rich Leto again. So just by way of background, my grandfather and his mother were brother and sister, and we've been working on our family history for many years. And Rich is joining us live from Columbus, Ohio, where he lives now. So I first met my cousin Giuseppe about 15 years ago when our family had lost contact with the folks in the village many years ago. Rich and I were doing a lot of work on our family tree, and I met Giuseppe online. He had the same last name as me and was from the same village, so I figured he had to be family, and learned over time that he was. About 15 years ago, I began giving him information for some of his other books as he requested it, and we finally met in person in 2009 when I went to Biccari with my wife and kids. Now, Rich and I have known each other since we were kids. As I mentioned, my grandfather and his mother were brother and sister. When I was a kid, we used to visit my grandfather every Sunday. I usually ran into his mother, Aunt Elsie, and her kids, Rich and his sister, Elaine.
Basically, Bob, just like Erick, our genealogy research is basically our Italian family history is no different from what you do every day on your podcast, Bob. It was such a rewarding journey to find our roots, quite frankly. My mom, her brothers, her sisters never really knew their father, Agnello, who was born in the Biccari. My grandfather, Agnello, dies in 1930, basically the Great Depression. He leaves my grandmother, Elisa Basile Lucera, to raise 7 children as a widow. So, based on Erick's research and finding of relatives in the family town of Biccari, it's really helped us understand the whole Italian-American experience that so many of us share, and you do once again in your podcast and your genealogy programs.
And there's so many of us out there doing that. But tell me, how did you come up with the idea for the book? How'd that all come together?
Yeah, there are really 2 main reasons that the book came together. The first was about 3 years ago when I noticed that between all the work that I had been doing and the work of a lot of other folks on ancestry.com, we had traced a significant percentage of the immigrants from our village of Biccari to America. We're very lucky that the province of Foggia has digitized all the birth records for the province, which you can see an example here from ancestry.com of the digital records. So once you could trace an ancestral branch back to 1860, it was pretty much a straight shot into 1700. So it really encouraged a lot of people to keep going. And as of now, there's probably ancestry.com profiles of over 1,200 immigrants from the village to Philadelphia.
That was a pretty amazing map that you put together for sure.
The other thing that I noticed was really something on my wife's side that spurred the data analysis on, which is kind of a part of this project. My wife was born a Wallace, the Scottish Wallaces, and the records in Scotland are pretty amazing and go back over 1,000 years. And one of the things I noticed was I kept seeing the same death date over and over and over again, the 9th of September, 1513. So I exported the tree and saw that she probably had over 30 direct ancestors with the exact same death date. So I just Googled it and found out that something happened, a big battle between England and Scotland called the Battle of Flodden Field, where all of these people died in this major battle. At the time, I was working with a woman from Scotland, and I asked her about it, and she knew all about it. It was a national day of sorrow for the loss of thousands of young men in about half an hour. And knowing how important Scottish immigration was to the founding of America, I suspect there's millions of people in this country whose ancestors come from the folks that died, in flood and field. So with that term, with all of that data, I coined the term big data genealogy, where you can analyze data to just bring more stories to light as opposed to just having names and birth dates. There really is a lot out there in looking at the data trends.
That's something that I kind of found. I didn't have a lot of information like that, but when I came across an old will that was translated, it was really amazing because you start to get the character of the people.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things, as you may know, I have a background in finance and understanding how data is used. We started doing some rudimentary statistical analysis, i.e., this big data genealogy. So we downloaded these ancestry.com trees into a GEDCOM PAF file, and then uploaded it into Legacy 9.0, which you see here. This program allows you to do data key searches on key terms, and then you can export the results to Microsoft Excel, which you can then use to really analyze the data. So some of the things that we did was we calculated how many people came over each year, breakdown of men versus women, average age on arrival, average number of trips, and where they settled once they got to America. We're also very fortunate that we have the church records of Biccari back to 1550. So we could then have people build trees even further back than what you could find online on ancestry.com. A lot of folks have their trees from Biccari back in the 1800s. In the church records, where it lists all of the different children for each of the fathers, and then you just go to the page numbers and get all the records. And then this slide right here is an example of one of my ancestors, Francesco Lucera, who's the father of all of the Luceras who have come from, the ancestor of all the Luceras who have come from Biccari. On Ancestry.com, we're able to look at a lot of other documents to get information such as military draft records, which are a wealth of information, and then also the ship manifests as well. And all of this stuff gets put into the database that we have. And I think the other thing that sort of spurred me to do this was just the reaction that I saw on Facebook groups to family history. I was really kind of shocked to the responses that you'd get out of an old picture that you post online. The reason that I wrote the book was when I went to my ancestral home for the first time. It was such an amazing experience in a beautiful town. I wanted others to share in that experience, which is why Rich is here, because he joined us for the first time this summer. And that's really who this book is written for, all the descendants, the 100,000 people who live in the Philadelphia area whose ancestors come from Biccari. I really wrote this for them, to connect to their past. I don't know if Giuseppe's with us right now, but he had written a series of books about Biccari called Biccari Tra 1870 to 1930. And this really fits perfectly with the time frame of the Great Migration from Italy to the village. And I can tell you, again, Giuseppe seems to have a technical difficulty, but he was writing these books based on the fact that he had started his career writing books on the brigands. And as he was going to the archives of Foggia with the section on Lucera, which collected all of the data relative to the brigands and all of the other cases that happened, he was seeing these court cases of people from the village. Mm-hmm. And he was seeing all of these cases of injustices. And that's what he wrote up in a lot of these books, these cases of injustice. So as he started going from 1870 to 1930, looking at all of the facts of the cases and writing up the stories, there was a lot of information about how people were leaving the village because of this. And what we were then able to do, was look at these books and look at the data that we had together, and then start analyzing the data relative to the story. So this was really a combination of the stories that he had from his books with the data that we had generated. So you can see there were two cases of murder where they had falsely accused people. And when we looked at the data of the immigrants from the village, what we saw was an above trend So we compared the percentage changes of immigrants for the nation as a whole to the village. And we were seeing above trend increases in immigration out of Biccari to Philadelphia at the same time these murder cases were going on where people were wrongly accused. And one of the wrongly accused is pictured here, Michelangelo Lucera, who was the brother of my great-grandfather, Agnello Lucera. So it's correlation isn't causation, as they say, but there's definitely a strong indication that these cases of injustice in the village were driving an acceleration of immigration out of the village to Philadelphia.
That's really something too. When you see those pictures and hear those stories like that. But I think Giuseppe is on now, so
we have Giuseppe.
Maybe he wants to give us a little insight into why he wrote the books.
Well, ai 4 volumi indicati dagli avvenimenti accaduti a Biccari nel periodo che inizia dal 1870 al 1931 raccolgono solo i fatti più salienti, importanti non solo per le persone coinvolte, ma tale da denunciare una giustizia di casta che veniva esercitata in quegli anni, niente affatto giusta. Il caso di zio Michele Arcangelo è uno di quei casi in cui viene condannato un innocente a 20 anni di galera e non è una cosa, come dire, ben fatta. Inoltre c'era una severità nel punire i contadini, nel punire le persone povere, e mentre si evince da questi libri che le persone nobili, quelle ricche, quelle venivano sempre e comunque salvate dalla giustizia del tempo. Io lo reputo importante questo lavoro perché in quel periodo, stiamo parlando del 1870, quindi è il periodo più povero del meridione d'Italia, e da questo periodo nasce la grande emigrazione verso gli Stati Uniti, che poi la grande migrazione verso gli Stati Uniti si è concentrata più su Philadelphia e non su altri stati degli USA. Questo poi è un altro discorso. Ma la causa principale era la povertà di un'Italia unita con la forza delle armi, ma non certo è stato utilizzato il rapporto tra popolazioni fratelle. No, anzi c'è stato un'appropriazione da parte dei piemontesi, del Regno di Sardegna, del nord nei confronti dei cittadini del sud.
Yeah, so just sort of paraphrasing what he was talking about here was, the fact that you had all of these cases of injustice. At the same time, there was a lot of poverty, which drove people out of the country. There was also a lot of pressure from the Piemontes in terms of enforcing their will on the rest of southern Italy. And that's really what drove the rest of the folks out of the country and to Philadelphia. All the poverty, the murders, and the forces of the North that extracted their toll on the South. And as we had mentioned, one of whom who was unfortunately charged and convicted was Michelangelo, Agnello's brother, who spent 20 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and the actual murderer confessed on his deathbed in the 60s. So It was really quite a shame.
That's something. Boy, that's incredible. So with the new book, what are the main points of the new book?
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
Yeah, so there's really sort of three main points. Let me just get to that section here. So the first is that we had noticed that a lot of the people were leaving Italy together. So right here, you can see on this slide a large group of people from Biccari leaving, literally on the same boats. And then we looked at the censuses from 1930, where you could get their addresses and the families and all of that stuff. And what we found were two big clusters of people, one in Tacony in Northeast Philly and another one in South Philly along Passyunk Avenue. And each one of these, which is on a Google map, is one of the families from that had immigrated from the village. And this is as of 1930. The real big collection of folks was up in Tacony, and you can see right here, as we get further and further into the map, this is a quarter square mile. And there's probably a couple hundred people from Biccari that were living in these houses right here. So that's kind of where we got the term New Biccari. The next thing that we had noticed was, as we were looking at the family trees of all of these people, so each one of these Tacony one would correspond to one of those balloons in that map. We were able to look at the family trees and see for each of them, there were, Catalanos, Dadarios. You see the same last names in the family trees: Goffredo, Ingelito, Lucera. And as I mentioned, a lot of the folks all of the folks who are Luceras come from one person who came to the village in the mid 1500s. All of the Goffredos came from two brothers that came from Abruzzi. All of the Catalanos seem to come from one person who had come from another town. And all of the Quecchias, for the most part, go back to Avito Quecchia or one or two others who had come from a neighboring village. So, what we were able to deduce is all of these people in New Biccari were all cousins. And I think that's why when you hear people that are 70, 80, 90 years old, and they speak of everyone as a cousin, I think they all knew that the people that they were living next to, they knew that we were all cousins. And I think this is something that faded over time. So that was really one of the other big revelations from the book was, the three main reasons are the cause of leaving due to the injustice, where they all settled, and the fact that they were all family. I think were the three big revelations from the book.
Yeah, and I, not being an Italian speaker, I just found it interesting because I picked up on, you said Lucera and Lucera.
Yes.
You said it both the ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it depends on.
Like my father's family, I say circular all the time, but it's really Circola.
That's right.
I just thought that was interesting. But let me stop you for a second. Rich, what did you think about all of this when you found out about your grandfather's brothers being wrongly accused or investigated?
At first, obviously, what a terrible family tragedy. And, not really sure if my family here in the States had known about that situation. If they did know, they didn't speak about it, let's say, right? Sort of when I was growing up around my Lucera uncles and aunts, it was sort of taboo to discuss maybe what had happened in the old country, specifically how one of our relatives was incarcerated wrongly. You can call it some sort of dark family secret that nobody talked about. It's definitely a sad story, no happy ending, quite frankly.
Yeah, the other thing I think that was surprising to me was seeing how close all of these people were. That I grew up in the suburbs, so for me, seeing this was kind of interesting. I don't know what Rich thought about. Rich grew up on Passyunk Avenue, which was, where there was a big collection of people from the village down here. So, Rich, I don't know what you thought of all of that.
Extremely surprised, fascinating to find this out. Had no idea that so many from Biccari settled in Philadelphia, and which historically is called the New Paese, and this New Biccari. As I said earlier, my mom really never knew her father, my grandfather in yellow. For the most part, when he dies in 1930, much of the family history sort of goes away, let's say, and it's only left to my grandmother to raise these 7 children as a widow. Once again, the Lucera aunts and uncles, the other relatives that did live in Tacony were really never mentioned back in South Philly in any sort of social gatherings, which was kind of unfortunate, quite frankly. Kind of a real shame, but once again, it seemed like there's some strained relationship in almost any families. And as I see it, the passing of my grandfather, probably in 1930, severed any ties that we did have with the folks in Tacony and Holmesburg. And really, that's unfortunate again for my mom, who had an aunt, had a cousin up there, and a deep connection to Biccari that was only a couple miles up the road from South Philly into Tacony.
And a lot of families drifted apart. I know you guys know that I, found a cousin that the family was connected from the 20s through I guess the early 70s, I suppose. And I lived 5 blocks from these people and never knew. And there was nothing, it was no family feuds or anything like that. It just,
Right.
just happens that way over time. So for Giuseppe, what's the third point of the book? Eric, maybe you want to translate that for us.
Well, basically on this slide, as we discussed, this would be the third, and I apologize for kind of moving too fast, but this was where we talked about the accumulation of all the church records and looking at all the family trees and seeing the same names over and over in these trees for the past 400 years. And there's probably 15 to 20 names in the village that are, a good percentage of that village, and were, the top 10 names were probably 1/3 of the immigrants to America. So if we looked at all of the immigrants, about 1/3 of them had these 10 same last names.
So Eric, did you do all this research yourself in Italy, or did you have people
no.
helping you there?
Yeah, it is a accumulation of effort, 10, 15 years. I'd say, starting with, Uncle Gennaro, who was the town record keeper and had done a lot of the family tree work for us, and then Giuseppe writing all of these books, and then Rich and I sort of carrying on the tradition from there. But also a lot of other folks on Ancestry.com that were building out all of these trees over the last 10 or 15 years. It's really sort of a group effort where all of this, through a tremendous amount of luck, was able to come together.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of work just researching one family, let alone a whole town.
The other thing that on this slide 25, so this slide 25 is the ancestral villages of the people from Biccari. So as we were looking at the church records, a lot of times it would indicate that a person was born of someone who came from another village. So for example, there were folks that came from Molfetta. So you'd see, Giuseppe of Antonio of Molfetta. And what we were able to see in these church records was that people that were living in Biccari in the 16 and 1700s had come from all over, mostly southern Italy. And we plotted on this Google map where a lot of the folks had come from. So you basically had, due to the droughts, Giuseppe had mentioned to me there was the droughts down here and the pestilence around here. People were migrating into the village in the 16 and 1700s, and where they really stayed for 200 to 300 years, intermarried, and eventually came to America. So it was really one big family that got on a boat and moved to Philadelphia. With these people were much closer than I think people realize. And they had come from all over Italy before Biccari, spending 200-300 years there and then coming to America.
And I find this map fascinating only because I know, you don't expect to see that kind of movement from a family across southern Italy like that, especially, in the mountains. People just stayed. So it was intriguing to me to see this map that they came from so many close, but in those days, distant places, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think there's much more movement in Italy than people think.
Probably, yeah. But it's hard to trace, and I see so many towns familiar to me.
Yeah.
Obviously, Bari and Taranto and places like that where some of my ancestors are from. So did you find while you were doing this, did you find any interesting occupations?
Yeah, I'd say that the one occupation that was most interesting was the hat making. There was a company in Philadelphia called Stetson Hats that had sent an agent to Biccari, and there were hundreds of people that had come from Biccari to Philadelphia that were working at Stetson Hats. And Stetson Hats was really a model corporation at the time. It had over 5,000 people in Philadelphia working at a factory where they were giving people ownership in the company. They all got stock. They were getting health care.
Wow.
They were getting citizenship education. They were getting other education. They had a 5,000 seat arena, or where they were putting on holiday parties and holiday shows. And it was a place that I think was a big draw.
Wow.
It
And
was a
what year was this? That's really ahead of the curve. What year was this?
yeah, you're talking 1900, 1910, 1920.
Wow.
And you can see on the World War II draft cards people from Biccari in Philadelphia working for Stetson into the 40s.
And so, but they weren't necessarily hat makers or had that skill in Italy, though, right? As far as you know.
Not in Italy, no. But some of them, like my great grandfather, started out in the Stetson and then went out on their own making hats.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that makes sense, I suppose. Yeah, they the entrepreneurial
Yeah,
type of people that wanted to have their own business. My
yeah.
grandfather made, and I have no idea why him and his brother made bridal crowns and bridal veils in America.
Wow.
No idea where that came from.
The
And
other thing,
my other grandfather was an iceman, so
wow, yeah, a lot of that.
yeah.
The other thing that we noticed was a lot of the traditions carried over, as we all know. And this picture here is the Feast of San Donato in Philadelphia. So this right here, this statue is the Saint Donato that exists in Biccari, but also in Philadelphia. They made a replica of it, and then had the same procession. So they brought a lot of their, as we all know, they brought these things over.
Sure. So I have to bring Rich in because Rich, like me, I was in Italy 25 years ago, 27 years ago, whatever it was, but didn't know as much as I know now. And then we went back in June, but this was your first trip. And I think it was it your first overseas trip too?
It was, Bob. It was really fascinating, to know that we all share that we have roots in the boots, roots in the boot, and your platform just showcases that, and I appreciate today. But yeah, first trip, I had a first class tour guide, being my cousin Cugino Erick Lucera, could speak the language, but you can see from these photos just to meet the extended family. We met Gennaro, the old gentleman that recently passed, which is a sad thing, but to meet Giuseppe, who's on here today. I've met Lucia, Michael, and Marcello, who has a family olive business for over 100 years. And, our collective history is across, whether you're in Napolia, Puglia, we're all connected, and we have these deep family connections. And once again, your platform and what we're discussing here today just enriches so much of us. And I'm so thankful for taking this trip, probably way too long in my life, quite frankly. We met some other people. I was fortunate to be able to see the house where my grandfather lived in Biccari, thanks to Eric. But yeah, it was my first trip. We hit Naples, your town, to see the port of Naples, where these steamships left, was definitely moving.
Mhm.
To see this procession of Saint Donato, that patron saint of Biccari, also what a wonderful experience. To walk those alleys, those roadways of the village that maybe my grandparents were walking on also. It's just very emotional. You're filled with joy. And I can't wait to do it again. And hopefully Eric will let me tag along next year in 2023, and I get to see Giuseppe and the extended family again, quite frankly. And then, to partake in that presentation in the town square, and you can see Eric's in the middle there. To the right is Giuseppe, who's here today. I'm sort of in the left with a white cap near one of the doors, but it was so emotional to see those people that knew our collective history, that so many had come from this beautiful village and settled in Philadelphia, and we're a part of that history. It's just kind of overwhelming, quite frankly. Just like your family history and everybody else that you interview, we're so fortunate to share that with everybody.
Well, and that's why
Yeah.
I tell people, Rome is nice, but unless you experience this, you have no idea. I know how you feel, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people listening that know how we feel too. But for people who haven't done it, it has to be on your bucket list. I mean, it just has to be.
I agree. Yeah. Thanks for letting me speak today.
No, my pleasure. And how was the food? I always have to ask, how was the food?
I mean, no complaints. I don't know what to say. Yeah, it was wonderful. Wonderful.
I love the pasta so much. I ordered a box of 20 different bags of pasta from the village.
Oh, well, the thing that got me was the olive oil. We don't have olive oil here. It says olive oil on the can, but it's not olive oil. And you have the family that did they make the oil themselves? And
Yes, Marcello Lucera, his family has that business for over 100 years. They have the olive groves, and we went to his production facility. He gave us a couple bottles of the olive oil, and like you said, there's no comparison to it here in the States.
yeah, when we went Fasado, they don't have a business. They just make it, and they gave us like a gallon or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but it was so matter of fact. The olive oil, the ham, the cheese, that they make it themselves. It was just like they look at you like, "Don't you do this?" And everything is, obviously so fresh and everything. And then again, uh, I met my father's cousins that I never knew existed. So Eric, what are you doing next? What's the next step?
I think what we're trying to do right now is just get our story out to as many people as possible. I think we're going to go down to Philadelphia in a week or so and do a live presentation, at the Italian American Immigration Museum in Philadelphia, and just trying to tell as many folks as possible, because I want everyone to experience what I experienced 15 years ago and what Rich just experienced is that feeling of going back to the village. I think it's just something that, for me, I encourage every Italian American to find their village and go back and meet their cousins, because it's unlike anything that you can experience, where you're going to walk into a place that your family lived for hundreds or thousands of years. And most likely people are going to know your ancestors or know who they were. And you're going to get this unconditional love and respect. And it's unlike anything I think you can experience.
Yeah, and they're just as thrilled that we're there as we are for being there. And that's what I found the most amazing. I'm not sure if anybody. There's a couple of people on. I'm not sure if anybody has a question, but if they do, they can certainly ask. Oh, okay. I just saw a question. Yeah. Anyone how I would be related to the Lucera family? This is from Lucia.
Lucia Marone, yes. Yeah, I would have to just look at so you're a Galdi, I remember that. And there are Galdis all throughout Lucera family trees. I believe in Giuseppe's family tree, there are some Galdis. And Yellow's brother, Gennaro Lucera of Philadelphia, was married to Arcangela Galdi. And all of the Galdis in Philadelphia came from one individual. And that's one of the things in the book that we didn't get into, is we cataloged the top 10 families and who had come over. Yeah, and she mentioned the Benelli family. I believe Zio Gennaro's family tree includes a Benelli, and we had Benellis on our Basile side as well. So it really is it's a web of people, not really a tree, as everyone shares the same ancestors and same families from this village.
And so my connection to the Galdi family is my fifth grade teacher was Miss Galdi in Queens, New York. So I don't know how she got there, but that's my connection to the Galdi family.
Yeah, the Galdis came from two areas in Italy. One is Biccari and the other is Capercia in Salerno.
Ah,
So the Galdis had come from the Galdis of Biccari had come from Capercia. But there
and
are,
I do remember she had green eyes, like real, green, not like hazel, like mine, green. So I don't know if that's a Galdi trait or not, but she had green eyes.
I was going to just ask if we can ask Giuseppe to, say a few words as we close it out. Eric, if you can ask me.
Absolutely, sure.
Giuseppe, dice per il popolo italiano?
Che c'è per?
Sì, dice, do you want to say anything in closing in Italiano?
No, non...
Dice in Italian della Libra di Biccari.
Questo?
Sì,
Questo di New Biccari?
sì.
Ah,
Commenta finalmente. Parole finalmente in italiano.
in italiano è stato molto apprezzato dai biccaresi. È stato anche molto venduto per la quota che siamo riusciti a stampare e si aspettano veramente un'edizione successiva per conoscere questa gente che sta a Filadelfia, qual è stata l'evoluzione sociale di questa gente che è partita povera da Biccari, in America si è risollevata. Adesso quali sono le condizioni economiche di queste persone? Questa è la domanda che mi fanno spesso un po' tutti i biccaresi. E dovremmo scriverlo, eh?
Well, listen, guys, thanks. This has been, great story, great book. I'll be sure we'll put on the blog, we'll put the link to the book out there for anybody from Biccari or around Biccari wants to read the full story. Amazing amount of work put in by Eric and Giuseppe and a bunch of other people to come to that. I'm trying to do something similar, and it's very, very difficult for sure.
Yeah, we hope that, I think with the book that we can encourage other people to do the same thing. And I think that's the strength of the Italian American culture, or all of the bonds, the traditions, the food, the family, and all of the things that I think were better known 25, 30, 50 years ago. And I think if we could leave a little bit of a roadmap back to that, it'd be great for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Eric?
Sì?
Il mondo degli italo-americani di oggi, di terza, quarta generazione,
Sì.
a Biccari è totalmente sconosciuto. Non sanno cosa fanno, non sanno come vivono, non sanno che lavoro fanno. Questa è un'indagine che dovremmo fare.
Grazie, Giuseppe. And
Grazie.
thanks, Eric and Rich. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Bob.